Good morning, folks. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. Welcome back. We've been away for a small little hiatus, but delighted to be back this morning. I have a great guest joining me, Nate C. Welcome, Nate. It's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What is in your cup this morning? Do you have a cup of something, anything?
You know, it's funny. It's called Coffee for Artists, and I completely forgot to get a glass of liquid, but it's okay. I'll survive.
All right. Don't worry. Don't worry. I have my my country mug this morning with
Very nice. I like it.
Black coffee. So, Nate, you are originally from born and bred New Jersey, based here, right here in the tri-state area. Tell me a little bit about growing up in this area. Were you somebody who kind of had a passion for the creativity, for the arts right out the gate, or is this something that's come later to you?
It's a weird story. So I feel like every kid grows up either drawing or sketching or painting. I was like a sketcher. I think I was half influenced by one of the kids at school. He was excellent. Some of his stuff probably rivaled like comic book covers at the time. Like he was very, very good. So kind of copied him a little bit, started sketching. That kind of ended when I was still in elementary school. And then I did, fast forward a couple years, did photography in high school, did a couple of those classes, you know, the old school, like darkroom, develop your own stuff, 35 millimeter type of stuff. And I did that during high school, loved it. It was awesome. High school ended, didn't really have a camera because I was borrowing one at the time from my uncle. And then got to school. School was great. They had a dark room, didn't have a camera, didn't have time to shoot because I went to engineering school. So that kind of died off a little bit. And then the iPhone and camera phones got big. So I never really lost the eye for it. So started taking shots from the camera phone. It looked cool. I was like, all right, well, I went to, I think like Alpha Graphics one day. I was like, hey, I'm like, I want to be able to print my photos. And they're like, well, would you take it on? It's like, well, I took it on my phone. They're like, yeah, that's not really going to work. I'm like, why not? So I had to do some research, figure all that out, and realize like, yeah, if you kind of want to print your stuff, you need a camera. Fast forward a couple years, I actually get a camera from B&H. Wasn't super familiar with like digital photography because it was different from 35 mil. You, for the most part, focus, point, and shoot. Digital photography is, I think, is a little more deliberate. I think is a good word for it. And went through, did that, didn't really know what I was doing, but I had some Photoshop skills, so I made it work. And then I think while I was traveling, I was in Japan, I was in Tokyo, made a mentor, took one of those Airbnb experiences. He was like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'll just teach you how everything works. Taught me how everything works. And I was like, okay, well, this makes sense now. And then I just kept learning and growing. And that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
That's amazing. So a bunch of stuff to unpack there, but you mentioned B&H, and I think it's worth telling people a little bit about B&H who are perhaps not from the New York or the tri-state area. B&H is what I like to think of as kind of like the Santa's grotto for photographers. It's like a mecca, right, of everything you can possibly think of for photography in this one place. And they have these like conveyor belts that bring the products down, and it's a very fun and interesting place if you are a photographer.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I'll admit I have switched to Adorama mostly because of proximity to one of the jobs one of the places I was employed at the time. Just happened to be around the corner, so that's why I went to it. But yeah, B&H is basically a warehouse of tech goodies, so it's very nice.
So you mentioned the shift there from, you know, the kind of old school analog methods of creating photography, and you know the shift towards the digital today. What do you like? Where do you feel the most comfortable in shooting? Are you somebody that today finds that you use both methods?
I use more digital photography. I'll admit I haven't done it in a really long time. I think it's making it's not making a giant comeback, but I think it's becoming more of like a niche photography type of space. So I know there are like some dark rooms here and there that are coming around. I think there's like a couple in Brooklyn that I've heard of from other photographers. So it's definitely probably something I want to relearn in the future. But for now, I'm kind of hanging out with digital and trying to make that work for now.
What do you think that, say, the kind of darkroom method gives you that you can't get from digital?
They're both similar, but they're both different. So for both methods, yeah, it's point and click to a degree, but at the same time, you do need to have some sort of technical aptitude to be able to get your shot correct. So in digital photography, it's like, okay, you know, your ISO, your shutter speed, and your f-stop, and your white balance.
I'm sorry about this background noise. Frank, stop it. I'm sorry. I apologize for my
No worries. No worries.
in the background right now. I'm sorry. Please continue.
So yeah, I feel like the process is similar, but it's just done at different times. I feel like your composition's still the same, but you compose more in camera for digital photography than you do for like old school photography. Old school photography, you point, shoot, and that's when you get in the darkroom. You know, put your film in, figure out how long you want to expose it for, and then that's where you kind of play around to see, like, are you exposing it? Are you going to burn this? Are you going to dodge it? And you got to put in the chemicals, make sure your chemicals are right. You got to leave it around. You can't let light in because it destroys everything, which I think most people know. Compared to digital, where it's like, yeah, you do most of that composing in your camera, take it out, and then if you want to edit it, you can edit it. So it's similar, but it's different. You just kind of do similar processes, just in different places in your workflow. I think that's how I look at it.
I think there's a certain finality to the old kind of methods of producing. You know, you have to really get that perfect shot, right? Whereas with what I'm seeing with digital is, you know, often when I've spoken to photographers, they've shared that, you know, to get that perfect shot, it's sometimes taken them 200 photographs, but they've had the ability to do that in such a short space of time.
Definitely. And I think that's kind of cool, because I think that's kind of how I think technology and life has kind of evolved. I think back in the day, it's like, all right, you don't really have the opportunity to go back and fix or edit. It's you do it once, you do it right, and you do it correct, because you can't do it again. Nowadays, it's like, all right, if you make a mistake, we can probably fix it. So it's kind of interesting to see how that mirrors like how life has worked as well too.
Absolutely. So you go to Stevens in Hoboken, you go and you study engineering. Tell me a little bit about that choice.
Yeah, so coming out of high school, I actually had 3 different majors in mind: chemistry, computer science, electrical engineering. I had done like a lot of like electrical and more circuit design and for like house circuits, and then like microcircuit design in high school, and that kind of prompted me to go to do electrical engineering. So that's what I ended up decided doing. But I ended up still wanting to do like computer science, because I still liked computer programming, and so I took classes, ended up doing computer engineering, because the computer science courses just clash with all my engineering schedule courses. So I did computer engineering, picked up a little bit of software development from there, and then basically self-taught the rest of the way and learned from good mentors.
Very cool. What was the first camera that you had? Can you remember?
Ooh, I remember my mom and I went to, I think it was a Best Buy for Black Friday, and I had a silver Nikon Coolpix from back in the day.
Very nice.
That was my first personal camera.
So what was it like growing up in New Jersey? Do you have siblings? Do you have a big family?
My family's pretty small. I have my mom, my dad, obviously, and then I have a brother and a sister.
Nice. And are you from a creative family? Was this kind of this encouraged? Were you supported?
I don't know. I don't want to say my family's strange, but I think my sister is also an artist as well too. Nice. Quick plug: 100 Vibes Gallery on Instagram.
Nice.
She's more of like a dark pop artist. She has some pretty cool stuff. So she does like graphic design and things like that as well. I'm more on the photography side. So
nice, very cool. So you had the support there, kind of right out the gate.
Yeah, my parents were pretty cool with it. When I was running around taking photos after school, they were like, sure, okay. My uncle said, oh, you want to borrow my camera? Sure, okay. So it actually was pretty nice.
Nice. So right before we jumped on this morning, you were sharing with me that you've been to 29 countries. So you are a very well-traveled young man.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that passion for photography, passion for travel, and how your photography has been involved in that process.
So that kind of actually happened by accident. So most of the countries that I've been to have been post, I think, 2017 onwards. Wow. So I think up until about 2015, I had been to, I want to say 3 countries, and then it just kind of snowballed. So the reason why it happened was actually kind of by accident. I was visiting a friend. So I feel like most of us, when we grow up, we learn geography, but we're not using it, so it just leaves your head. So I had a friend who moved to Switzerland for work. I didn't really get to see him because he told me very last minute. So I said, hey, you know what? Leave a air mattress or leave room for me. Like, I'm gonna come visit you next year. He's like, okay. So I think this was December 2016. I said, hey, by the way, I wasn't kidding. Like, I'm coming to visit you. I just bought my tickets. Please have my room ready. So I ended up getting to Zurich, which is where he lived at the time. And then I was scheduled to stay there for like 2 to 3 weeks. The job I was working at the time was pretty lenient on remote work. So I told my boss, like, hey, like, at the time I only had to be in the office on Wednesday. So I was, hey, I'm going to take vacation from this Wednesday to this Wednesday and then leave like some extra time in between to just work from Europe. And he was like, you get your work done, sure, go for it. So I get there and I was looking at the map and I'm like, all right, well, where's Zurich? And I look at Zurich, I was like, oh, wow, there are all the European countries. Everything's right next to each other. They're really close. So I was looking at my funds and just like, well, you're already here. You might as well go visit other stuff while you're around. So then I think I visited, and I only planned on going to Zurich and hanging out. I ended up going to 6 countries that trip. I think it was like, where did I go to? I went to Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, and Austria, because I had a friend who was living in Austria at the time. And then from there, it just kind of kickstarted. I was like, hey, traveling around is really fun. And then later that year, some other friends I had in Spain, I went to go visit them. So I ended up going to, where did I end up going to? Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Northern Ireland. And then I think I went to Iceland later that year. So it just kind of snowballed and it was fun. And it was nice to see other places and take some of the photography. And I think that's around the time where I just started to switch into like digital photography, because like, yeah, you can take nice shots in your mobile phone. Like, they're great today, like shockingly good, but I still wanted to be able to print them because I was like, hey, what if I want to hang this up in my room? So that's when I think in 2017-ish is when I got mine.
Wow. That's a lot of travel in a short space of time. I certainly miss that about Europe. It is amazing that you can, really travel within a couple of hours and be in a totally different country with different language, different culture, different landscape, different experience. What has been your favorite place thus far to photograph? What's been kind of the most surprising for you?
To photograph? That's hard. So I'm going to give my top 3 because it's very hard to choose.
That works.
I'm going to go with South America, is stunning. I'm not going to group it into countries. I'll just use it as one kind of location as itself. And let's see, the other 2, Iceland is beautiful. I can't wait to go back. Iceland is beautiful. And then I would go ahead and say Spain is probably, actually no, Japan. Japan is definitely my 3rd favorite place to photograph.
So in addition to all this traveling, you revealed that you also speak 4 languages.
I'll say 3.5. My Japanese is not so good yet. It's getting there.
So where did is this passion a new thing that came from all this traveling? And you see, it sounds like you have a natural ability to grasp these new languages as well. Where did it come from?
I don't know. I think it is partially a natural ability, but I also notice like languages, I feel, for lack of a better term, they're just structured sound. So they're all patterns. And I think because I have like a computer programmer / computer science brain, which is, it's basically all pattern and pattern recognition, I think it helps and makes it a little easier for me to pick it up. Because once you see one pattern, for the most part, you see one, you can kind of get the rest of it. So it makes it easier for you to pick up things faster if you think that way. And it also helps too, because like for a small period of time, I was learning a little bit of Russian to kind of eavesdrop on some of the people in my office at the time. But it was really confusing because it was like, all right, well, a lot of your characters look exactly the same as like English script. And that's when it kind of, the wheels started turning in my head. I was like, okay, well, if you stop looking at them as like letters and looking at them as representations of sound, then it makes it easier to learn. Then you just map it and it's easier. So that's kind of how my brain works. So yeah, I think like one of my goals is kind of try to learn most of like the major languages or the major UN languages, so, like the Romance languages, obviously English and Spanish, or not English, wow, Spanish and Portuguese, and then eventually I'll do Italian or French. But then I want Japanese because it's so different, so out there. And I do like Asian culture and Japanese culture a lot. So I figured, hey, it'd be good to learn. And then I do kind of want to, I don't know if Mandarin's going to happen one day because it's really hard. But yeah, I want to pick up at least like a couple more for fun. I think it's fun. And honestly, it's helped on travels. When I went to South America, every country I went to, I knew how to speak to everyone. So it was a really interesting experience because a lot of people go to other countries and it's like, hey, I need help with X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, I know how to ask you where this store is in Portuguese. So like, I'm okay. If you drop me somewhere, I'll figure it out. Like I won't die or anything like that. So I'll survive. So I think that's also helped as well. And it's cool. Like it's really fun and entertaining to me. And I love learning. So I think that's also half the reason why I kind of push myself to go so hard.
Yeah, I imagine the response from the locals is much warmer than what it would be if you were trying to kind of just speak to them in English.
Very. It's really interesting. Like, if you know really well the local language, it's like a whole new world opens up. Like, oh, you're a foreigner, but you speak our language. I mean, obviously you have to be careful about things, but for the most part, people are really nice. They'll take you around and be like, oh, well, if you're coming, you're visiting, you should visit like XYZ location. You're like, thank you. I did not know about that. Now I know all the secret little spots that people aren't really going to know about or find. So it's nice.
So what was the most surprising place for you? What kind of took you, by surprise, and either because it was, more beautiful than you imagined it to be or more culturally rich?
I'm going to say surprised me the most. I'm going to say it's going to be a tie between Iceland and Prague. Iceland because like I knew of it, I knew it was really pretty, and I knew it had the northern lights, but I didn't realize like for the most part, a large percent of the population is in Reykjavik. That's kind of it. Like they're sprinkled around the rest of the island, but like the rest of the island is basically an explorer's paradise. Like I think when I went to Iceland, I got a one of those like hotspots with my with the vehicle that I got, and I basically just drove around. And sometimes you would see people for a really long time, and sometimes it's really packed because you're by maybe like a waterfall or one of those tourist attractions. So it's that I think surprised me a lot because I didn't realize how heavily concentrated the population was. And then Prague, because Prague has a lot of really interesting culture. So like apparently they have a lot of jazz bars there, and I had no idea. So when I went there, I think it was like a Saturday night. I was looking for something to do, and there are a lot of jazz locations that popped up. So I was like, all right, cool. Like I'll check it out. And it has that almost stereotypical European like feel to it, where you're walking around at nighttime and it has that very like romanticized feel to it. So that's one of the reasons why like I love like walking around during Prague. It's super nice. Everyone's super friendly. I did not learn much Czech, unfortunately. I know like Ano, that's it. But that was a super cool place to visit too, and I would definitely go back.
Yeah, I was in Prague in the winter, in the height of winter, several years ago, and it was December, and they had this really low sitting fog, so heavy that when you were walking on the streets, if you put your hand kind of more than a couple of inches in front of you, you could not see your hand.
Oh, wow.
That spookiest place like at night, because as you know, they have all the lanterns and the bridges, and very kind of like creepy looking place, but it's fun. But amazing, beautiful architecture, incredible, jazz, like you mentioned, and surprisingly great food. Just a really wonderful place to visit. I think we hiked up to the I think it was a monastery or some kind of chapel, and drank some glühwein at the top of the mountain, and really beautiful place. So I'm with you on that one, but it was a little bit spooky. So you mentioned you had a fear of flying. So how does somebody with a fear of flying end up taking their camera and running off to 29 countries? Tell me how you conquered that fear.
I don't know. I think it was more of a fear of the unknown combined with flying, because I had done it. My family's from Jamaica, so like we flew back and forth all the time when I was younger, but I remembered some of it, but not all of it. And I think it had been a really long time since actually I'd stepped on a plane. So I kind of looked at it as an opportunity. Well, when I first started, like I want to say back in like 2014, when I started kind of like traveling the US a little bit. So I kind of looked at it as an opportunity to kind of conquer that a little bit. So, I mean, like you do it once, you're like, oh, this is nowhere near as bad as I thought it was. What was I afraid of? And then I think there was at one point in my career where I was flying back and forth every week to Texas. So it's very interesting how life plays out sometimes. But yeah, I stepped on a plane, and once I did it, and once I figured out like things are close and it's not that bad, just kind of kept going.
I can definitely relate. I too had a pretty paralyzing fear of flying growing up, and then, last year I think I took something like 42 flights, something ridiculous.
Wow.
I think the more that you do it, the more kind of comfortable it becomes. Plus, I had an experience where I actually sat next to a pilot, and
That's cool.
yeah, it was very cool. It was a particularly bumpy flight, and he was just kind of explaining the mechanics of all the different sounds, and it. He said, it's just like being on the train. It's like, or in a car, you're on a bumpy road. Like, it's the same concept in the sky. I was like, okay, I can live with that. That's okay. So I totally relate. But yeah, the more you kind of, push past those fears and push through those barriers, the more comfortable you become. So definitely. So what do you, the photographs that you put out, there's some incredible work, and I encourage everybody to go check out Nate's Instagram. It's really incredible work. We're going to give you the link at the end here so you can check it out. But a lot of these images are captured like on your travels. So what do you hope that the viewer takes away when they view your work?
So I guess I'll kind of reverse engineer it, because I'm an engineer and can't help but do these things. One of my I used to, when I started doing photography, I used to go to a lot of street fairs just to kind of get my name out locally and have people like see and or recognize my work. And someone came up to me and said, like, wow, and when I see your photos, it really makes me want to be wherever this is. And I guess because I'm more of an explorer type, I kind of want people to like look at these places and be like, hey, this is cool, or at least find beauty in it. I think the natural world is very beautiful, especially a lot of like the untouched stuff that we haven't really looked at as humans and haven't really built up or just kind of left alone. I think it's really nice to look at those places and attempt to find meaning in it. I kind of look at them and said, hey, like for me it's kind of capturing them and say, hey, like this is really pretty, I really like this, I'm going to capture it. Or, well, that's more with like nature, landscapes, well, not landscapes, more cityscapes. It's kind of like, hey, what's a really cool vantage point for the city? So I guess that's kind of what I want people to look at. It's interesting because a lot of people don't know a lot about things outside of their sphere of reference. So it's kind of interesting to see like, hey, like, oh, this is in your country. You're like, really? Where? I had no idea this was a thing. So it's kind of cool to be like, hey, like I've explored, kind of see like what life looks like through my eyes in other places. So I guess that's kind of how I look at things a little bit.
So you talked there a little bit about vantage points. Has there been any challenges in getting that perfect shot? Have you taken any hairy, scary risks to get that perfect shot?
Yes, I have a couple stories about that. So in Prague, the Prague Castle, so for a lot of people who don't know, Prague actually has their own version of the Eiffel Tower. It's not an official Eiffel Tower, but it was made by the same architect, and it kind of looks like it a little bit from the top part of the tower anyway. So when I went up there, apparently it's a pretty good vantage point for the Prague Castle. So you actually look on my page, scroll back a little bit, there's I think a reasonably decent shot of it, and you're not really allowed to take photos there. So I was going to set up my tripod because I have a nice travel tripod, brought it with me, and I was about to take it out, set it up, trying to take a good shot of the castle, and a worker came up to us and says like, no, you can't do that. I was like, why not? And he said, like, well, there's a military base around here, so you're not actually allowed to set up your tripod. If you want to take a shot, you can take a shot, but you have to use it by your hand. So that was really challenging because I did not take up my tripod. I was good. But it was really hard to get that shot because to get your camera stable, and it was at night too, so it was hard to figure out good settings whereby there's no camera shake and whereby I could put it on the ledge and still capture everything. So that was really tough. So I think that's one of the risks I took. Second story, I was in Portland, out by Multnomah Falls. If you haven't been there, it's super beautiful. Definitely go check it out. I think it was between Multnomah Falls and I think it's Horsetooth or Horsetail Falls. I always mistake it with another place in Denver. But there was a waterfall, and I was there visiting a friend, and he was tired because unfortunately he was sick at the time. And we were walking through, kind of going back a little bit because obviously the front's by the road and you have to go a little further in. And I looked at it, and there got to a point where it's like, all right, well, there's water everywhere, so you either have a choice. You either turn back or you keep going in further, but you're obviously going to have to get into the water. And I looked at it and said, well, I don't know if I'll be back here again. So I took off my shoes and walked in the water. So wow. I walked almost all the way to the back, and at some points it was almost waist deep. And there was actually like a waterfall, like a secret waterfall, all the way in the back. So I think that's one of the like mini risks that I took because we didn't really know where it was. Along the path, there was like a skeleton that was just kind of there. Yeah, very interesting. I never actually got the story behind that either.
Wow. That's
So yeah, I was able to go back and get that. That was back when I was still kind of like poking around for fun, taking shots on my phone, not really knowing if it was going to go anywhere. But yeah, that was super cool.
Wow.
Let's see. I know there was another semi-risky story. What was it? I know Iceland was kind of crazy. Yeah, there were a lot of snow drifts where I could not see very well while I was driving. So that was a tad dangerous. I remember at the time I was trying to chase the Northern Lights. So I had an app on my phone that would tell you, like when it was most likely to appear and where. So I'd be leaving in like the middle of the night. Just me. I didn't know about wild animals, didn't know about people, or it was safe. Just got in my car. I think I was using like iHeartRadio at the time, put on my music, and basically drove to the middle of nowhere at night in Iceland to see if I could catch Northern Lights. So unfortunately, no. And it's very frustrating because of the COVID-19 situation. Apparently now this time of year is actually a really good time to catch them. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely marking my calendar. It's a return visit. I definitely promise you that on that one.
That must be like the ultimate for a photographer to actually kind of capture that in real time. Those colors are just magnificent.
Oh yeah. I've seen photos and I still feel like they probably don't do the phenomenon justice at all.
I'm sure. So who are your influences? Who inspired you? Are there any particular, do you have any heroes?
Yeah. So I want to say a couple of years back when I started going to like larger art fairs, I went to Art Basel and wandered into a Peter Lick gallery and was blown away. His stuff is fantastic. Mm-hmm. So I've actually been to two of his galleries, one in Miami and one in Houston. And his stuff is really, 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 really good. The two photographers that I think that inspired me the most for my type of work are Peter Lick and Stephen Wilkes. Stephen Wilkes does a really cool day to night composite photography shot where he basically takes a time lapse for almost like 24 hours and photographs the entire, does a still, just keeps shooting for 24 hours straight, and then he merges the day and night portions of it into one shot, and they're stunning. So that he's probably one of my biggest influences. His stuff is really cool. And then Lick, because he's more fine art, but he also is a self-taught photographer. Yeah. And basically, I think he made it his goal to basically travel to all 50 states in the US. So I know I was at his gallery just flipping through his book. And I looked at it, I was like, well, this is cool to see that, you went from not knowing anything to selling a photo for like $2 million or something like that. So it's kind of inspiring to me. It's like, look, it's really not about like where you start. You just need to put your best foot forward, keep studying, keep learning, and keep doing what you can do to get better. And, you know, as they say, like, keep training, keep studying until your idols will become your rivals. So hopefully one day.
I think that's really sound advice for anybody else that's listening out there as well. Like, I too believe in being just a continuous state of study, right? Always learning. You are actually enrolled in my art business bootcamp right now.
I am.
I'm delighted to have you. Tell me, at this point, you've really kind of honed your craft on the creative side. What made you make that decision to, really invest in yourself on the business side? And what are your kind of aspirations in terms of developing as an art business professional?
I don't know. So the art business piece started by accident again. I basically signed up for a couple street fairs, said, hey, like, I wonder if I could actually print these on canvas and see if I could sell them. And I actually sold a reasonable amount my first year. And I looked at it going like, okay, well, you can actually do this. And the second year was a little rough. I was still trying to figure out my like target audience and did street fairs. Didn't do as well the second year. And then the third year was basically the COVID year, which is this year. This year, I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to do the street fairs because I was looking at it going like, okay, well, people like my stuff, but people aren't necessarily buying. And I know like art is a very emotional thing. You need to find something that you connect with, but there is still almost a business aspect where you need to figure out who your target audience is, figure out once you figure your target audience, the people who connect with it will most likely buy. Mm-hmm. And that stuff I learned a lot from a friend of mine who runs a cake business in Zurich, the Cake Lady. If anybody's interested, go check her out. She's awesome. And we had those conversations, and it kind of led me to understand, it's like, yeah, art is art, but if your art doesn't sit on anyone's walls or it doesn't get out anywhere, what is it? Like, it's cool, it's good, but then it's really just a hobby. And it's cool if it's a hobby, but it would also be cooler if you could say, someone says, hey, I have a piece from Nate C. It's really awesome. You should check out his stuff. So that's why I kind of made the jump to kind of make the effort to kind of invest in it, or at least learn some of the skills required or some of the techniques to, move some art. And kind of move. I've already decided this year I was going to move. Probably this is going to be my last year doing street fairs. Thank God COVID happened, so I didn't do any. And start trying to like actually get into, like actual art shows for people who go there, who appreciate art and are more likely to say, hey, I love your work. I could see this hanging in my house, or I could see this hanging in my apartment. And yeah, that's kind of why I signed up for the course to learn. I already love learning, so I figured, hey, it's one more thing. Just put it on.
Well, we love having you, and I think it's it's great that you honed in on the the connection to that ideal client, because I talk about this a lot in the course, but so much of what we do is art is really a luxury item, right? So it's it's not something that you can go buy in Target or Walmart, and obviously you can get your very specific type of art there. But when people purchase original artwork, they're looking for something extra. They're not just looking for that piece. They want that story. They want the story that you just shared with us about chasing the Northern Lights. Like, they want to know that that piece on their wall has meaning and has depth, because it's something that will carry on in their lives, that they will share with guests in their home, at a dinner party, or when they pass this piece on to their grandchildren. There's so much more involved in original artwork than just the piece itself. How do you feel when you show your work?
I feel like I have a little bit of imposter syndrome. And it's interesting because I like my work. I think I do a good job. I think my skills have grown. If you scroll through my Instagram and look through some of my earlier work to some of the stuff that I have now, they're very, very, very different. I think most, if not all of the later works that I've done are levels orders of magnitudes, I think, better than some of the early stuff. And I actually had a friend tell me the same thing. She's like, yeah, I can notice a stark difference in your early work and your later work. So I had a bit of imposter syndrome before because everyone says, oh, this is gorgeous. And I look at it and it's like, I'll admit I'm very hard on myself and I'm a little hard to impress, but I still look at it going like, I like it, but there's stuff that'll be like, yeah, I really don't like this at all. And someone else will be like, no, that's gorgeous. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. But yeah, I think I have a lot of the imposter syndrome when it comes to that. Like, you're an artist, but it's still a very strange being called an artist. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, I don't feel like I'm really an artist. I'm more along the lines of like, hey, like, I love photography. I love sharing my vision with people, and this is kind of how I share things. I don't really have the highest confidence about it where it's like, hey, my art's the best stuff ever. It's more along the lines of, I really like my stuff. I hope you like it too.
I don't think you're alone with that feeling. I think a lot of us feel that imposter syndrome. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We don't really need external validation. I mean, it certainly helps when somebody says, "Oh, I love that," and it certainly helps when somebody says, "I'll take that, I'll buy that." But if you're doing what you feel you're supposed to be doing right in that very moment, and you still have that fire in your belly and that passion, I think that's all that you need. It's just some of us, I think it's hard to own that word artist, right? It's hard to say that word artist. And I think that society has a lot to do with that because of what we've been told that an artist is. It's not this, savvy business person who's out there, making their own decisions and, navigating their own success. It's somebody who's, this starving artist who's waiting for opportunity to kind of fall into their laps. But I think we can change that narrative.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a stereotype. And I feel like in today's society, I think modern society is currently now, I think it's all about breaking stereotypes and kind of letting people understand it's like anything can be anything almost to a degree. So I think it's good for any artist to take classes or learn. It's like, hey, like your art's, someone is going to find your art wonderful because someone will connect with it. That's just how it works. It's just a matter of finding the right person. And then that's why I take the course to figure out how do I find those people.
Exactly. What has been the most, memorable, meaningful, or bizarre even feedback that you've received from somebody about your work? Been anything that stuck out for you?
I've been told that some of my work looks like paintings. And I thought, and it's not the first time. I think it's probably because of the media that I printed it on. But I think in the beginning, when I was doing street fairs, more like putting things on canvas, seeing if people liked them. And a lot of people said like, hey, this is beautiful. Did you paint this? Mm-hmm. I looked at them very confused. I was like, I didn't. But it's very interesting that you think that. Mm-hmm. And that would happen on a regular basis. So I'm kind of curious as to what people think when I put them on acrylic, metal, more traditional style, photographical paper. So I think that's probably the most bizarre, but I think it's mostly because of the medium that I used.
Very, very cool. What would you say is the most validate or the most rewarding part of what you do?
The most rewarding part? I don't know. I feel like it's like the late nights when you're up at 3 a.m. in the morning, struggling over pixels, saying like, hey, is this a speck of dust on my camera, or is this actually what you looked at when you were taking this photo? Like, I think a lot of people don't understand, or I don't want to say they don't understand. I don't think they can appreciate the process as much because a lot of the final product is a lot of very meticulous work. And I think that meticulous work is the most rewarding part for you to say, hey, this is what the beginning looked like. You want to make sure that when you edit your photographs, there still looks somewhat like the original work that you shot, just with a little bit of a pop to it. Or at least that's in my opinion. I think that's the most rewarding piece, to see like the beginning and then see the final product and then be like, that's the one. That's a shot. Hit save.
Is there one piece in your collection since you started doing this that you're really proud of, that's kind of like your signature piece that you would perhaps be reluctant to part with?
Is there a piece that I'd be reluctant to part with?
I know it's a little different with photography because you can obviously print multiple pieces, but is there one that you really kind of hold dear that is meaningful to you?
That's hard. I think there's a solid like 4 or 5 pieces, which I think are probably my best works. There's one of the Freedom Tower, which is older, that I really, really like. I actually went and redid it the other night. That one is one of my favorites. There is a long exposure that I did in Colombia, which I love. And there's another one that I did in Argentina. It was of a gorgeous sunset, absolutely stunning. I'm talking the stereotypical pink candy skies, all of that. That one I actually did, and I have hanging up in my house. There's a couple of my works that I do have hanging up in my house, I will admit, but it's nice to be able to look at those and kind of remember the memories of like, hey, remember where you pulled off on the side of the road because this looked really cool and you backtracked and took that shot. Oh, that's a good story. I forgot about that story. Okay. Yeah. I remember from one of the earlier shots I did for your question earlier about the riskiest shots. I was in Spain with friends and we had pulled off on the side of the road to look, just kind of hang out, look at a park. May or may not have ditched them and may or may not have kept following in the park for about 20 minutes to the end. And there's a stunning overpass where you could basically see the entire mountain range of Cantabria, I think it is, in Spain. Stunning. So yeah, I think that would be one of the ones too, which would be like one. I'll be honest, like there's a couple that are my favorites, but all of my works, when I look at it, I can be like, hey, I can remember where I was when I took this, and you can kind of remember what you're feeling at the time, being like, wow, this is pretty cool.
That's amazing. And they are just these perfect little captures of memories, photographs, right? You can recall kind of the smells, the experiences, the emotion that you were experiencing. It's really awesome. So you also do some portraiture work. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the challenges and what you perhaps enjoy about portraiture work. Because it's very different going from kind of these isolated, beautiful landscapes to really quite an intimate experience, I imagine, when you take photographs of people. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I actually, again, a lot of my life, I'm noticing, has been kind of a giant accident that just kind of snowballs. But I think, as I mentioned before, a couple of years ago, I was working down the street from Edorama, and I happened to stop by because I wanted a new lens for my camera. And I think someone wanted me to take shots of them, and I wasn't super familiar with flash photography. So I made it through, but they weren't great. And I was like, okay, Photoshop. But then I think I went back a couple more times and I noticed they were doing live demos of portraiture. And I was looking at it going like, okay, I'll stick around. This looks interesting because I did it before and I wasn't great at it. So I was like, okay, it's a learning experience. And I learned, understood a little bit of what was going on, but whose phone is that? It's okay. Yeah, I learned a little bit of that and then decided to kind of keep learning and keep going. So that's kind of what I did, kept learning, keep going. And it's interesting because it's technical and creative at the same time. So with landscapes are where they are. Like you go find them and then you kind of have to wait for the right conditions or wait for lighting to get better for your landscape to look, I don't want to say correct, but look optimal or have it match your vision. For portraiture, it's very different because you kind of have to have the vision first, and then there are a couple ways to do it from a couple different photographers that I've seen or followed. You either come up with your vision first and then reverse engineer to say, hey, what kind of light am I going to use? Or you get to your subject and say, okay, well, instead of your landscape just being there and you shooting it, you kind of have to put in the little extra effort to say, hey, how do I want you to look? What can we do creatively to make you look how I want you to look? And how can I set up my lighting to make you look the way that I want you to look and have it look good? So I've taken quite a couple classes, quite a couple like live hands-on demos with like different photo pros. I went to Photo Plus last year, which was super interesting. Watched the demos, which are great. And yeah, I think that's probably why I like it so much, because it's very creative, but it's so technical. So you have to be technically sound to get what you want out of the creativity that you're trying to produce. Hopefully that made sense.
No, it does, and I'm curious though, how does it feel to work with personalities? Because I imagine every single person, it's a different experience, right? And it sounds like from what you're sharing that there's a little bit of art direction that or quite a lot of art direction that goes into this. You know, you have to pick the lighting and tell the person obviously how you want them to stand and to appear. How different is that experience to being kind of out solo, you know, in the middle of nowhere in Iceland? And which of the two do you find you feel the most comfortable in?
It's very, very different. So far, knock on wood, I haven't had any real bad experiences, at least from my perspective, working with different models, quote unquote, subjects or different people. But I do feel like people are people. I mean, like, as you said, portraiture is very intimate, and you're trying to capture the person in their best light, unless you're trying to make them look terrible, which is another thing, if that's what you're trying to do, or if that's what the project calls for. But I feel like to be able to do that, you kind of have to build like a rapport. It's like, yeah, I'm taking pictures of you, but I also kind of but I would kind of want you to feel like natural / confident in the moment that I'm shooting you. Because to a certain degree, you know, as landscapes kind of, or different types of photography or art can elicit certain types of emotion from people looking at it. It's the same thing with photos. There is a certain emotion that is involved with the way people are looked or the way they're portrayed in certain portraiture. So I think some of the mentors that I have or I've looked at, like, they're people who shoot weddings, where it's like, hey, you really want this person to look like this is the best day of my life, because I mean, it kind of is. Or if you're another one of my mentors primarily shoots, he does a lot of like special effects makeup. So it's like, you're not trying to look happy, you're trying to look moody and very different. And there are other people who are like, okay, well, I like to do editorials, so it needs to look like you're on a magazine. It needs to have some sort of style to it that elicits that kind of certain kind of emotion as well too. So there's a lot that you can do with portraiture. And to finish up this very lengthy answer to your question, which do I like more, feel more comfortable with? I'll say I'm partial to landscapes, mostly because of that process of exploring. Obviously, you can explore people as well too, but if you're shooting people, you have your hour and a half, possibly 2 hours to shoot your person. That's your exploration, and then you're done. With landscapes, you can shoot it, hang around, explore, view what you're viewing for longer, feel those emotions, and then keep going and find something else to explore, or kind of check around the area, see what else is there that I can look for. With people, your sessions can vary. It can be like, hey, you know, like, we've got a bunch of stuff we got to get done really, really fast because we're, I don't know, near sundown, so the flight's only going to be up for so long. Or you're like, okay, well, you're in the studio, you've got a little bit more time, but you still have certain looks that you want to kind of make or create, but you still have limited time because you're not in the studio forever. People are people. They get tired, they get hungry, all different things. So I think that's my thoughts on that.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, so we are going to take some questions for Nate. So if anybody has any questions, just pop them into the comments. I think my last question to you, Nate, is really, what are your aspirations? What do you, if you could kind of fast forward 5 years, what would be your kind of big picture goal? Where do you want to go with what you're doing?
So like I said, this year I wanted to move more towards actually being in different art shows. For those who don't know, I'm based out of New Jersey, which I think we went over already. But I am in the Ad Art Show. It's supposed to be a digital art show up in the Oculus in Manhattan. So that I think that will be up from September 1st to the 30th of this year. Obviously, COVID's around please be safe. Like, I'm sure they'll have the posts online. But yeah, check it out. I think I should be a featured artist there for 1 or 2 weeks. Don't remember off the top of my head. And then I think I should have some pieces going up on Artsy through the promoters of the show, MVVO. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, like, I'll be posting more about that as it comes out. I'm waiting for the press release, but I'm probably just going to announce it and do it quietly and then do like an official when it comes out. But yeah, so I think my goal would be doing more shows like that and kind of be more in the art realm and hopefully be less obscure and maybe a little more well-known. I think that would probably be my biggest goals in 5 years.
Fantastic. And where's on your travel list right now? I want to know where you want to get to next.
So I really wanted to visit Africa this year. I feel like it's one of those regions of the world which aren't really well explored, and I want to say it's partially the media's fault because they don't really paint it as like the greatest place in the world. And I know some parts have their issues, but I do feel like there are a lot of parts that are unexplored. I think it's Namibia has like a massive waterfall, one of the largest in the world. Would not have known that about it because no one really talks about it. So that's definitely one place that's on the list. Definitely planning on going back to Japan. I am super excited to find time to go back to Scotland. I want to go up north and basically be a mini nomad and just shoot. So that's high on my list. And then South America. I want to go everywhere. I really do. But definitely Scotland is top of my list. Africa because I haven't been there before. And then probably back to South America. And then I think those are the top 3. And then 3B/3A would definitely be going back to Jamaica and going up into the mountains and shooting and finding stuff to take shots of.
Amazing. If you get to Scotland, you have to go to the Isle of Skye.
Isle of Skye? Okay.
Yeah, it's in the I'm trying to think on which side of the coast it's on. It's on the northwest coast. And every summer, that's where I used to go vacation as a child, and it would pour with rain, and we would camp in a tent, and it was brutal, but just magnificent scenery. The mountains, the lakes, or the lochs, and just this green that you can't really, you don't really see anywhere else. It's really, really magnificent. So cool. Certainly look forward to keeping up with your travels and obviously seeing the beautiful photography, photographs that you produced from these experiences. So we have a couple of questions here. Actually, I think it's just this one right here. Let's see. Jen. Hello, Jen. All right. So Nate, thinking about curating a show, what would be your soundtrack?
My soundtrack?
You had an exhibit and you had to have some music playing. What kind of music would you have?
It would probably be either light reggae or, I'm biased, of course, either be light reggae or some sort of like deep house soundtrack, something just to be cool and set the mood a little bit. Nice.
Very, very cool. And great question, Jen. Always with the great questions, Jen. Fantastic. All right. Well, that is a wrap for today. Nate, I would love if you could tell our viewers where they can learn more about you, your Instagram, your website. We'll pop them in the comments right here.
Sure. My Instagram is natec.photos. That is for all my landscape / future work that I plan to do for my art. Portraiture, I think there's a link there as well too. I don't remember it off the top of my head. It's linked in natec.photos. And I do have a website. It's natecphotos.com, in the middle of a redesign. So that'll change soon, but definitely feel free to look me up there, drop me a line or drop me a message.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Nate. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to keeping up with your progress and your successes over the next couple of years. Definitely. Likewise, Rachel. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. All right, folks, that's it from us for today. That's our show. We will be back next Thursday. In the meantime, do go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube, or like us on Facebook, and we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks again.